My name is Rory Johnston. I'm a PhD candidate at Simon Fraser University, and I've been studying medical tourism for I think around 6 or 7 years now. My work in my master's is focusing on medical tourism and its impacts in Canada and the experiences of Canadians going abroad. And my PhD work is focused more on development initiatives in the Caribbean, focusing on Barbados, Jamaica, and Belize. So very small players who are trying to make way into this market. My talk today, though, it's focused less on what's going on and more just to put on everyone's radar some of the conversations going around in the academic literature around, especially in health services and bioethics, around some of the concerns raised by medical tourism. This is not to say medical tourism is bad. It's just to say that when developing this industry, one must be very cautious and forthright in thinking through the ways this may impact local populations and making sure that local populations benefit. So I'm going to quickly provide a quick background just to make sure we're all on the same page when I talk about medical tourism. I'm not talking about marijuana tourism. And then I'm going to move into just the 3 core ethical critiques, and then we'll go on from there. So when we talk about medical tourism in bioethics and health systems literature, we're really talking about patients who choose to go abroad. They're sitting in their home country and they say, I want to go to Costa Rica for a facelift. I want to go to Cuba for a hip surgery. We're not talking about expatriates living abroad who go for routine care or tourists on a cruise ship who come down with a gut disease. It's really about that intentionality of traveling. And like Mr. Woodman was saying, there's also those patients who are just traveling abroad for leisure, and then they say, you know what, I'm here, I'm going to get an eye exam, or I'm going to get something done. That would also fall into the category. It's also privately paid. So these are not patients who are traveling abroad because their government is sending them abroad. That has a very different kind of health systems and patient risk profile. It also excludes complementary alternative care because this is more broadly health tourism, but not medical tourism. This is really getting at the surgeries, the diagnostics. So just to be cautious when talking through this, making sure you're talking about, you're all on the same page. I've talked to many people and they'll be describing a Reiki healer as medical tourism, and really that would fall in a very different kind of domain of health tourism. So the rationale for medical tourism is very clear. It's been proposed that patients benefit because they can get faster access to more affordable, higher quality care. Health system benefit because it incentivizes investment into new infrastructure. It generates more hospital revenues, and it also has been said that it will help retain health workers who would otherwise emigrate abroad because there's more patients to treat, there's more money to make, they don't have to go to the more lucrative systems. And then lastly, the economic rationale is clear, creates employment, generates foreign exchange, these kinds of things. Today I'm going to focus more on the upper 2 domains because this is really the health systems element and just being very careful to make sure that there are also potential adverse impacts and regulating in such a fashion, being cautious in such a fashion that the local population is not adversely impacted. Or one's travelers either. And so when I'm talking about the ethical critiques of medical tourism, excuse me, it's coming from a domain of public health ethics, and really this is focused on balancing the rights of the individual with the rights of the community to good health, and that good health is not systemically undermined. And the large question emerging from medical tourism is who benefits, and is anyone adversely impacted? Oh, did I just turn that off? Oh my goodness. Okay, so moving on to the 3 domains. With regard to internal labor migration, there's a concern that medical tourism, if done improperly, can incentivize doctors and nurses who are scarce in every health system in the world to choose to work in areas that are more lucrative but don't actually deliver much of an impact for overall health of the population. If this is in the Caribbean, we're all aware of the enormous scarcity of nurses who choose to emigrate to the UK, Canada, and the US. And there are just concerns that this could draw nurses who are otherwise staying in the country for familial reasons, whatever reasons they are not emigrating, into the private sector and away from the public, where generally speaking, the health needs are greater. Likewise, rural to urban migration, clinics and hospitals are typically located near airports in urban settings. Is this going to draw nurses and health workers and other health workers out of the rural settings where, again, health needs tend to be greater? And lastly, the question around whether or not medical tourism incentivizes health workers to stay locally, this really starts to get questioned around the issue of clinical relevance. Are we retaining a large stock of cosmetic surgeons, but are we still losing many of our pathologists, oncologists, specialists who that are not as readily needed or commodified in medical tourism? So just being cautious of these claims. Issues around patient safety. In Canada, we have many patients who choose to go abroad for bariatric surgery, in particular orthopedics, areas that we have large wait lists. And consequently, we also have many patients returning with very botched surgeries that then spill into the public system. And this is not to say care outside of Canada is bad. There are excellent hospitals in every country in the world. It is just to say that regulating the health sector is difficult and expensive. To make sure that you can retain one's tourism brand as a safe, reliable location, the medical sector is people's health is on the line. So one must be very careful of this. Around issues of continuity of care, typically patients when they go abroad do not tell their doctors at home these kinds of things, and there are questions of whether or not this is the best quality of care if the care is not being sewn seamlessly across borders. So making efforts, even if one is to enter into this sector, in talking with one's physicians, can we kind of work to try and work with physicians abroad to develop these communication networks so that patients don't suffer? Likewise, complications can spill over into one's public system of destination countries. So even a cosmetic surgery carries risk. There's no such thing as a risk-free surgery. And often, in the case of Barbados, for example, the intensive care unit is in the one public hospital that the country can support. If surgeries that carry complications and risk start being carried out in greater proportions, will this result in more tourists ending up in the public system and using up those resources, those beds that are in high need at all times? So again, just being very, very careful when planning around the sector to make sure all of the moving pieces are being taken into account. Blood supply. Is there enough blood kept on the island? Sorry, thank you. With regard to unproven medical interventions, stem cell tourism has been talked about a lot. And this is an ethically contentious area in that it's poorly regulated, and as at a marketing level, it's not yet ready to be done. There's not therapeutic benefits proven. It's still experimental. So being very careful that the therapies being offered in your country are clinically proven and safe. This is treacherous, and it's wrong for patients to be accessing these services. One of the reasons medical tourism is so much, health services are so much cheaper in places outside of America is because medical liability is much lower. So just being cautious of where the cost savings coming from. Lastly, international transmission and infectious disease. There's just questions of whether or not medical tourism can serve as a vector for patients, because hospitals are sites of disease and infection. Just being very careful that being aware that this could serve as a way for patients to travel and transmit infectious disease across locations. Are the regulations in place? Lastly, the inefficient resource allocation is a bit more abstract and from a health systems perspective, but medical tourism is pretty much dependent on curative care. People do not travel for blood pressure tests, these kinds of things. Curative care is also what is busting the budgets of healthcare systems around the world. Healthcare systems as a whole are trying to move towards preventative care and primary care. Are we going to be left with health systems that are unsustainable into the future at a population level? So just being careful of these things. So to provide a quick summary, medical tourism is not bad. That's not what I'm trying to leave everyone with. I just would like to make sure that these things are on the radar of everyone who is interested in this sector, to be aware that health systems are incredibly complex, and this is just one more complex factor that interacts with them. Thank you.